Thank you very much. Thank you for sticking around. I know happy hour is here, so I appreciate it. I'm just about to launch a new product called your Product Discovery. That's really exciting, so tell your product marketing, your product managing friends. But today I want to talk to you a little bit about my favorite part about marketing, which is storytelling. So I'm going to start off with a question that's on everybody's lips, no doubt. What do a caveman and Apple CEO Tim Cook have in common? Now, I know you're thinking, yes, they both have nice tans, they both have lovely physiques. One is a boss of a multi-billion-dollar company, the other one is not. But what they have in common is something that we all have in common, and you've most likely guessed it because it's in the title of the presentation, which is storytelling. So we're all storytellers. It's as old as time. Long before we were even human, we used to gather around fires. We would gossip to each other. We would tell each other where the predators were. We would tell each other where the good tribes were, where the bad tribes were. We would talk about which berries were likely to kill you, and you wouldn't say that this berry is 26% more statistically significantly going to kill you than this one. They'd just say that Bob, the caveman over there, had horrible diarrhea and died a horrible death. And that's the way that we sort of consumed information, and that's the way that we took it all in. Now, these days, it's a little bit different. These days, we tell stories in pubs. We tell stories to our kids at nighttime, hopefully not in pubs. And we tell stories online, of course, which is why it's called Instagram stories. But for some reason, when it comes to business, we struggle. We were talking about this earlier on. It's just like there's a blocker. And I think what happens is it just gets like kicked out of us in formal education. You start handing in essays to teachers and to lecturers, and they punish you for unique storytelling. You kind of have to follow a certain formula. But what I want to share with you today is how powerful storytelling can be, both for you personally as a marketer and for your companies. I'm going to show you how it can make a hell of a lot of money if you do it right. To do so, it wouldn't be a good presentation on storytelling if I didn't tell a little story. So I'll take you back to 2018. You might remember this Cambridge Analytica scandal from Facebook. The sort of TLDR on it was that all of our data was being harvested. We didn't really have any privacy, shock horror. It's something that we all kind of knew, but it was out in the public sphere all of a sudden, and all of a sudden people started doubting big tech. 1 year later, this is the ad revenue for the big boys. So you can see Google's pulling in around $145 billion per year. Facebook are coming in around $64 billion per year. Amazon's about $13 billion. And Apple, remember our good friend Tim Cook, they're at $500 million, measly. You couldn't even buy a football team in London for that. So you can imagine at this stage, like Tim Cook is sitting around in Apple and thinking, okay, we haven't really innovated. There hasn't been some great hardware in a while. We haven't shipped any new iPhones that are getting people excited. We haven't shipped any new Macs that are getting people excited. What we do have is a hell of a lot of brand loyalty. And what we have is a very, very powerful brand. That's, in fact, the most valuable asset that Apple has. So he's looking at these figures and he's thinking, okay, well, how do I stop our competitors winning any more of this revenue? Second of all, how can I take some of this revenue for Apple? And third, and most importantly, and this is where storytelling comes in, how can I do it in a way that it doesn't negatively impact Apple's brand, but actually bolsters it and makes it stronger? So he started telling stories. Now, this happened before 2019, but this Time article that he wrote was like a stake in the ground from Apple, where he came out and he said, you deserve privacy. Here's how you could actually get it. Now, in this article, he didn't go on and say, Apple is brilliant, Apple can do this, Apple can do that. He did two things. He highlighted the problem, which is you have no privacy, and he highlighted a common enemy, big tech. Now, of course, Apple is big tech, but because they put the stake in the ground, they're different. They've set themselves aside, and they're the sort of heroes. Now, at the same time, the product team in Apple are shipping updates like this to your iPhones. Anybody who has any sort of Apple equipment might have seen this. You might be surfing on Facebook. Surfing, that was like the old man thing to say. Shame. You might have been, I don't know, what do the kids call it? Looking on Facebook, whatever. Going on Facebook and you'll see something like this where they're asking you to track all of your data. And of course, what are you going to do? You're going to say, no, I don't want Zuckerberg seeing what I'm doing. And you press no. So now what Apple have done here is they control the hardware, so they're able to stop the likes of Google and Facebook from targeted advertising. If they don't have targeted advertising, it becomes a lot more expensive, and it's harder to do, it's inefficient, which means all of those advertising dollars have to flow somewhere else. You might be guessing where this is going to end up. I'll show you at the end. So pretty powerful stuff. Now, he could have just sat back, watched the dollars flow in, and think, yes, I'm brilliant. What a great CEO, which is probably what I would have done. But of course, as I mentioned earlier on, the brand is the most valuable thing at Apple. So you can't just win the revenue. They have to make sure they bolster the brand. So they do what they've always done, what Apple have at the very core of their DNA. They started telling stories. Now, you've probably seen ads for Apple around London and bus stops and wherever else talking about privacy. This one here that I'm going to play for you is my favorite. And what I'm going to do is going to play it, and then I'm going to show you the formula that they used, or the framework. And I was delighted. Was it Elaine or Chloe earlier on that was mentioning the story brand framework? It's built exactly around this, and it's so, so useful. So let's watch the video, and then we'll go from there.
The next sale is a digital treasure trove, charming Ellie's private data.
What?
Lot number 1, her emails. The one she's opened and read, wonderfully personal. Let's start at 240, 260, 280. Sold. Lot number 2, Ellie's drugstore purchases. Voila! Priceless data. Do I hear 480? 500. Sold. Her location data. It's not creepy, it's commerce. Do I hear 600? 620? 640? 660? Sold.
Nana?
All her contacts, even sweet Nana. Sold at 740. Her recent transactions. Her browsing history. Her late-night texting habit. Sold. And now the one you've all been waiting for, and I can promise you won't be disappointed.
It's a masterpiece. It's so good. Like, there's something, it's kind of funny. You've got that, like, it's almost like a circus music. It's a bit Black Mirror-esque, but it's like so powerful. The agency that put it together, it's fantastic. And you think, all right, they're a billion-dollar company. How did they do it? Yes, absolutely. It's a golden ad. But they follow this same framework that we actually used at Atlassian to put together the first GR brand campaign recently. This is what we were talking about earlier on at the table over there. I'm not wearing my glasses, so I have no idea where you are. But this is the same formula. So there's a hero or a character. She has a problem. She meets a guide, gives them a plan, calls them to action, helps her avoid failure, ends in success. And if you think back to the last 10 movies that you've watched, the chances are that they've probably followed this framework a few times. You probably studied Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, if anybody's done English. I'd recommend very strongly this book from Donald Miller called Story Brand. So I watched Cinderella with my daughter recently. Not a very good movie, and I really feel sorry for stepmothers anywhere. Disney just hates stepmothers. But anyway, it follows the same framework. So you have the hero, Cinderella. She's got a problem, her shitty stepmother. Oh, sorry, cursing. She meets a guide, her fairy godmother, bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, gives her a plan, the pumpkins, all that stuff, calls them to action, go to the palace, helps them avoid failure. That's almost midnight, your shoe, all that crap. Ends in success, she kisses the prince. So it's the same thing that Apple used here in the framework. So let's go through and just dissect it for a second. So first of all, we got our hero, that's Ellie. Now, you can't just speak to everybody here. You have to be very intentional about who your hero is. You've got to spend a lot of time on that. There's persona work and all of that stuff that we've been learning earlier on today. For Apple, Ellie is very much a typical Apple person, very think different, going against the stream. She's shopping for LPs in an old-fashioned shop. She has a problem, and this is beautiful. This part of the ad is just so good because this idea of data and privacy, like I said, we all sort of knew it was a problem. We all sort of knew that we didn't have any privacy, but it was zeros and ones in the cloud, and it's never going to happen to me. They personified it. Look at all those evil people just sitting there, just buying and selling all of her data, even her nanny, for Christ's sakes. So Ellie has a very clear problem, and they lean into it. And this is where she meets her guide. And her guide, this is our brand, this is our product, this is our benefits, where she just pulls the iPhone out of her pocket, and boom, the music changes, the tone changes. She's back in control of the situation. The fairy godmother in Cinderella, the wand, exactly the same here with this feature that Apple uploaded. So she makes them disappear. She literally makes all of the bad things disappear by pressing her iPhone. and it helps her avoid failure. And this is so smart, the juxtaposition here as well, because Apple have actually done a fourth thing here in that they're trying to entice new customers. So I'm an Android user, I don't use Apple, but you can't help but sort of stand there and go, oh, there's a data auction somewhere that's selling John's data online with all those creepy people where all you Apple people are safe. And that's a pretty powerful message as well. And of course, it always ends in success, which means she has control over her own data. So I want to give a credit to Nathan Bowe there, because this is the seed of the story that I saw. Good person to follow on Twitter. So that's how it is. And I want to show you that, yes, this is B2C. Yes, this is Apple, a billion-dollar company. But this can work just as well in B2B, which is my world. And I'll show you that in a moment. But first, I want to just take a little chance to introduce myself, because I never did. So that's me there on the left-hand side. I'm the bigger dinosaur with my family. You've possibly noticed that I've got a very odd accent. I've lived everywhere, from like Canada and America and Chile, Argentina. I'm in Dublin at the moment, but usually in Sydney. Before I was sort of up here and doing a big boy job, I had a pretty eclectic background, to say the least. So going way back to my late teens, I wrote for a gossip magazine called British Balls. Yeah. I'll just leave that there. I decided that probably wasn't the greatest career for me, so I moved to South America, which seemed sensible, and wrote for the Canadian Rockies Tourism. Also kind of a weird thing that paid about $6 an hour, which was fine. Then I decided maybe I can write some children's books, so I wrote Tommy Tomato and a collection of other great stories, which didn't make any money either. You can see this journey going somewhere. So finally, I said, let's move to London. Great things happen in London, and I can become a grown-up there. Instead, I joined a rock band. You can imagine how my mum was feeling at this stage. And played about 25 gigs a week in London to try to make ends meet, which I didn't, which is why I ended up working as Santa Claus. And yes, that's actually me, without my beard and costume on, working in Westfield in Shepherd's Bush. If you ever brought kids there about 10 years ago, I'm really sorry. And then finally, I did say, okay, I'm going to grow up. I went back to Sydney. I set up my own business called Romance Outsource, which, not as dodgy as it sounds, it writes custom songs for people and for businesses. And after all of this, my wife got pregnant, and I thought, okay, now I really need to make some proper money to feed people. And I decided, I looked back on all this, and I was like, well, what is it that I'm good at? What is it that I do? And I finally realized that it was storytelling. That's all I was doing, was ever taking complex, scattered information and putting it into this like digestible pill that people could take and enjoy and be persuaded by. And that led me to product marketing. And I kind of make that sound like, it was just from there to where I am now. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of tears. Eventually, I ended up as head of marketing for a small startup that got acquired by Atlassian 3 years ago. And I've had a blast ever since, just sort of telling stories on a day-to-day basis and feeding my child, which is good for her. She's getting some food. Just don't call child service, thank you. On the route, I've worked in B2B and B2C, so I often get this question when I talk about storytelling is it not very different when you're talking to B2B or B2C? Look, a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's a little bit easier in B2C, in my view, because you have this direct relationship with the consumer. You can see who it is. B2B, you might have different personas. You might have a champion, you might have a buyer, you might have other people to get through. But at the end of the day, all you're trying to do is just make an authentic connection from one human to another, and that's all you've got to do. Just keep remembering that authenticity. And if you sort of remove all of that formal education in your background and just go back to basics, it really does seem that simple sometimes. With that in mind, I want to give you a real-life example from about 2 years ago. So this was a slide that was put across my desk when I was working in Jira in Atlassian. So anybody who knows Atlassian or Jira, it's traditionally been known as a very technical tool, something that developers use and software people use, and it kind of has this negative perception from non-technical people. Sometimes fair, sometimes not. But we were building these new tools for people that were technical, so people like you and me, marketing, finance, legal. But the problem was there was still this big brand gap. They would use it, but they would struggle to get people to come with them because they're like, oh no, that Jira thing is just like software, it's code and whatever. And this is still a battle we're facing, absolutely. So this came across my desk, and naturally they said, what are you going to do? I said, storytelling. And they said, oh, yeah, you again. And I brought a story brand framework, and this is where I always start, and I turned this into a little script, which makes me feel great because I'm doing writing for a living. And that's like, okay, who's my hero? What's their problem? Blah, blah, blah. And we put together the first Jira brand campaign, which launched last year. We just dipped our toes into the water, but you'll see a lot more of this in the coming months ahead as we launch in Europe and spend some money with it. And I want to give it to you and show you how we use the same story brand framework in the B2B video as well. Just a big caveat, yes, this is a video that we put together with our internal team. It's not Apple. We didn't have $1 billion, but still, let's just watch it and see.
And we can't change the launch date. We have to reinvent the wheel in 3 weeks.
Now that all our teams use Jira to manage work,
I'm angry.
there's not much to panic about.
Dang it.
Because with Jira, our teams can handle anything, like pivots, deadlines, and super ambitious goals, all without the drama. But we're having trouble letting go of how we used to handle things.
Okay, so you can see there, yeah, okay, it's not Apple, but still, this was the most efficient and effective advertising campaign that we've ever had in terms of impressions and brand perception. And it's not rocket science. I mean, it did take us ages. It's not as simple as just there's a script, there's a video. It does take lots of iterations, but still, it gives you a little bit of science to put to the madness of the art. And if we look at them all across the path here, I know that's a lot of imagery for you, but you can see across B2B, B2C, and Cinderella, my favorite movie, it's always the same. A hero, problem, she meets a guide, gets a plan, call to action, avoids failure, happy ending. And this is a really, really good way. If you're struggling with storytelling, read this book and play around with it. I think you'll learn a hell of a lot from it. In the first iteration of this presentation, I had lots more. I was going into case studies and pitch decks and product tours and websites, how you can use the same framework. And then I realized it was running for about 3 hours and 20 minutes. So I thought I'll just keep it short today and stick on mostly videos. But the same framework works across case studies, in particular when you put your hero, your customer as the hero. Even better, again, if your customer can do the talking for you, if they're doing it on social media, if they're doing it on TikTok or all of, like, anywhere really. It works beautifully in presentations as well. I've used it for sales enablement. I've used it for raising funds in the past. If you want to get a bit of a kick, you can have a look at Tinder, which was called Matchbox back then, I think. Their first round of raising money was using this framework, and it's both very good and very funny. But of course, storytelling isn't just this one framework. It's a lot more than that. It's a good starting point, but it is as much art as science, maybe a little bit more, to be honest. And that's why sometimes it's messy. Sometimes you just have to put a bad first draft down and then build from there. Some of the tools, I mean, this isn't going to blow you away. I had like animations at this first of all. I was like, yeah, this isn't all that impressive, so I'll just put it on the page for you. But for me, I just read and listen. I'm listening to podcasts all the time. I'm reading books, watching movies. Like I watched a Matthew McConaughey movie with my wife and then used that as a sort of storytelling device to do some internal persuasion. Anything you see, just think, like, people are bored. People are sitting around their offices. They see the same things all the time. How can you just shake them out of their stupor? And on that note, use humor wherever possible. It does the same sort of thing for you. Metaphors, analogies, they're great ways for you to just wrap something big into something small and digestible. They can be so powerful. Even if they're overused, it helps, and it can help you communicate and tell a story. And as I mentioned earlier on, if you're not authentic, it's going to be very, very hard. When McDonald's pivoted to try to sell healthy food, they sort of succeeded, kind of, but they spent billions and billions and billions of dollars rebranding and trying to make themselves come across as authentic. It's just not there. It's hard to do. Okay. So back to our caveman and Tim Cook, because I want to close out this chapter and show you how Tim Cook matched up a beautiful bit of storytelling with some really smart strategy and how they won the market and how they won the day. So at this stage now, he's ticked off 2 out of 3 things. 1, he's halted revenue growing for the competitors, for the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. 2, he's bolstered the brand. Apple looks like the good guy. They've come out saying you deserve privacy, we're giving it to you. But 3, how does he win it? How does he actually win that market share for Apple as well? They need some revenue. Well, You saw earlier on the pop-up that they provided when you were surfing on Facebook. I did it again. And this time, they do their own version for Apple. And again, if you use Apple, you might see this. Now, there's a lot of copy there. It's basically a novel. If anybody was to ever read it, it's very friendly. It's like, we just want you to see personalized ads, and we just want the best for you. There's a big shiny red button there that, of course, 90% of people are going to press, which means all of a sudden Apple control the hardware and they control the software. They can do targeted advertising, which makes them the most attractive place to go if you're a small business or a medium business or any business that wants to do some advertising. So how does this work out over time? Here's a chart. See, I am a grown-up, I told you. You can see the dark blue there, that's Apple, and this is the percentage of app installs from 2019 all the way up until today. You can see not just how they're growing, but how they're squeezing the competition as they go. And this is only going to get more prominent over the next couple of years. In revenue terms, I said they had $500 million in 2019, if you recall. By 2020, that was doubled to $1 billion. By 2021, almost quadrupled to almost $4 billion. And by 2026, they're projected to have $30 billion in ad revenue. $30 billion from a little bit of storytelling and strategy. So the next time your boss or anybody says to you, what's the real return on investment on storytelling? You can give them the answer that it's exactly $29.5 billion. And if they don't believe you, you can tell them that Santa Claus told you so they have to. That's it. I know happy hour is here, so I think I finished a little early, which is maybe no bad thing. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. It's taking me back.
Thank you so much, John. That was really, really interesting and fun. We're going to pepper you with some questions now and get as much knowledge from you.
Yeah, pepper away.
Okay, I love this question. Top voted question is from Milos, and he asks, how would you approach story, brand, framework, and storytelling if there is no problem? What if you need to launch a vitamin and not a painkiller?
Yeah, I love that vitamin painkiller stuff. To be honest, it's the same thing. So, I mean, the case studies are a perfect example. So after we launched the Jira brand campaign, we sort of followed it with a bunch of case studies from customers where they told their own stories. And in many terms, it's not like, life would never go on without you, Jira, as much as we wished it was. It was simply life is better. You're our guide, we're the hero. And it's the same thing, the same framework. You go in and that they have a problem. And the problem might be that they just want to be a little bit healthier, which is what vitamins do for you. So it doesn't have to be like a life-ending thing for you to use the story brand framework. It's just a framework to help you persuade, entertain, and tell a story.
Okay, nice.
Two exclamation marks. Who is that?
You can tell this is coming from product marketers. Great presentation. How were you able to convince techies internally to not ruin the story with 1,000 product benefits? This is a great question. And this came up. So when we were getting the brand campaign, it was all the way into its sort of final phases. And it became like this, I was going to say this baby we have to protect. Yeah, okay, let's go with that. Like this baby that we have to protect, and it goes through these extra channels, and it goes through like the technical audience and the developers. Oh, thank you. And it goes through these developers, and they go through, and they're like, well, where's all the features? Where's all the features? And that comes later. That comes down the funnel. Like you can tell that story a little bit later. You have to sort of grab them first, make sure you get them and like intrigue them. And then as you get them lower down into the landing pages, that's when you can start unraveling a little bit more what it's all about. But there's a funny story as well. My boss's boss at the very last minute had this sort of panic about the cursing in the ad. And we had to tell a story to him. Like we had to sort of all gather around me and the brand team and the creative team and put this metaphor together and sort of explain to him how like doing that would make the ad very vanilla and make it lose any humor, which would lose any potency, which would lose the whole impact of the campaign. And he's never said sorry, but I think he knows it. So yeah. Good stakeholder management.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got some upvoting here. Okay, how do we apply good storytelling to diverse formats like email, SMS, websites, where we may have more or less flexibility for conveying the hero's journey?
Yeah. So one thing that we do at Atlassian, we use message houses. Does anybody else do that, or is that a make-up thing? Yeah, okay, one hand, that makes it real. So we put together message houses, and Atlassian is not a very sales-centric company at all, so we're very light touch. We do have a sales team, but we put together message houses, and in there we sort of tell a bit of a story, but we also back it up with stats and facts, and we sort of have value pillars. And the idea is that anybody, whether it be sort of somebody who's doing Google ads or the sales team, or maybe it's an exec doing a presentation, that they can dip in and out of the message house and take what they need. And it's up to me as the owner of that message house to keep it fresh and to keep it consistent and to keep it real. So that's the way we do it. So if we're like running a campaign for my new product, Jira Product Discovery, we have a message house, and anybody that wants to pick and choose from it, they have to go through the message house. That's kind of like our filter before it gets to me for approval. And it nearly always it's perfect because it's the copy I've written, but at least consistent with the copy that I've written. Yeah.
Okay, I think we want to know about you as a human being. Tell us, what's the best song you ever wrote?
God. So the band that I was in they were great, Statues of Us. Check them out. We're never going to come back, but still. They were like a heavy, like rock, folk, hip hop band, and they were like, yeah. And I was like this, like Damien Rice, like Irish dude, just wanted to write love songs. And when when we were putting together the songs for the album, I managed to squeeze like one love song on, called "Guilt," about ex-girlfriend, obviously. And like now and again, they'd let me do it in a set to sort of, midway through if people were, a bit tired of rock. So I reckon that's probably my favorite one.
I think people are enjoying your examples from Apple and Atlassian. Do you have another example of a favorite B2B campaign? What would you point us to?
Let me come back to that one. I'll have a little think on that one.
Okay. All right. This is a great one. So how do you balance the responsibility of storytelling with the brand team? Do you partner with them? Where does PMM lead versus brand?
Yeah, this is a good question. So it was really interesting when we started this campaign because, you look at a company like Atlassian. I started 3 years ago. There was 3,000 people. Now there's 10,000 people. So there's been like a lot of change over the last 3 years. And looking from the outside in, I would have assumed that there was this like focused brand team that worked on Jira. There wasn't, it was my boss that was working on it, and then she went on maternity leave, and she said, "It's yours now." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And sort of, a few months into the campaign, they hired the first Jira brand specialist. And I was curious because everything I know is sort of self-taught. I was like, okay, well, how's this going to go? And it was wonderful. It was just this like lovely partnership. He came in with like a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. I came in with my Santa Claus and whatever else. And the partnership was very collaborative and symbiotic. Like we would spar, and he would challenge, and I would challenge, and then it would go to the broader team. And we had a lot of autonomy. We were left almost alone all the way to the end, which was wonderful. But I imagine in other companies it's a little bit harder. There's more persuading and there's more wrestling to be done. But in this case, it was just a perfect partnership, really.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we will wrap it up there, unless you have thought of a magical B2B campaign that
I thought you were going to ask me to sing. I was like, please, we'll end it now. No, to be honest, there's nothing to the top of my head.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, let's give a big round of applause, John.